It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Boston when my world turned upside down. The leaves were just starting to change, painting the streets in warm hues of red and gold. I remember walking up the steps to my in-laws' brownstone, my arms laden with bags from the local farmer's market. I'd spent the morning carefully selecting the perfect ingredients for a family dinner, hoping to impress my mother-in-law, Margaret, with my culinary skills. As I entered the house, the scent of cinnamon and apples wafted through the air. Margaret was baking, as she often did when she was stressed or had something on her mind. I called out a cheerful greeting, my voice echoing through the hallway. The response I received was silence, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I made my way to the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. As I pushed open the swinging door, I saw Margaret standing by the window, her back to me. She was wearing her favorite floral apron, the one my husband, Tom, had given her for Christmas last year. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her shoulders were tense. "Margaret," I said, setting the bags down on the marble countertop. "I've got everything for dinner. I was thinking we could make that pot roast you love." She turned slowly, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Her eyes, usually a warm brown, now seemed cold and distant. There was something in her expression that made me take a step back. "Sarah," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "We need to talk." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. "Of course. Is everything okay? Is it about Tom? Or Dad?" Margaret shook her head, a humorless smile playing on her lips. "No, dear. It's about you." She gestured to the kitchen table, and I sat down, my legs suddenly feeling weak. Margaret remained standing, looming over me like a judge about to pass sentence. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, her fingers tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop. "About family, about legacy, about what it means to truly belong." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The tick of the clock seemed to grow louder, marking each second of this surreal moment. "You've been with us for what, 3 years now?" Margaret continued. "And in that time, I've watched you try so hard to fit in, to be one of us. It's been admirable, in a way." My heart was racing now, each word feeling like a prelude to something terrible. "Margaret, I don't understand. What are you trying to say?" She leaned in close, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I couldn't. I was frozen in place, captivated by the storm I saw brewing in her gaze. "What I'm saying, Sarah, is that it's time we stop pretending. You're not really one of us. You never have been, and you never will be." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The kitchen, with its warm colors and familiar scents, suddenly felt alien and hostile. "But I'm married to Tom. We've been together for years. I thought I was part of the family," I stammered, hating how small and weak my voice sounded. Margaret's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Oh, sweetie, marriage doesn't make you family. Blood does. And you, my dear, don't have a drop of Callahan blood in your veins." I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you saying this now? What's changed?" Margaret turned away, walking to the oven to check on her pie. The smell of apples and cinnamon, once comforting, now made me feel sick. "Nothing's changed, Sarah. This is how it's always been. I've just decided it's time to stop pretending." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "But Tom, he loves me. We're happy together. Doesn't that count for anything?" She faced me again, her expression now a mix of pity and contempt. "Love? Oh, Sarah, you're so naive. Do you really think love is enough in this world? In this family?" I felt anger beginning to bubble up inside me, pushing past the shock and hurt. "What do you mean, in this family? What makes the Callahans so special?" Margaret's eyes flashed dangerously. "We are old money, Sarah. We have a legacy to protect, a reputation to uphold. And you, with your public school education and your middle-class background, you're a liability. Each word was like a dagger, precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. I felt my hands shaking, and I clenched them into fists at my sides. I've never done anything to embarrass you or the family. I've bent over backwards trying to fit in, to be what you wanted me to be. And that's exactly the problem, Margaret said, her voice dripping with disdain. You try so hard, it's almost painful to watch. Every time you open your mouth at a charity gala or a board meeting, I cringe. You don't belong in our world, Sarah. You never will. I felt something inside me snap. All the insecurities, all the times I'd felt out of place or judged, came rushing to the surface. Is that why you've been so cold to me? Why you've never accepted me? Because I'm not good enough for your precious family. Margaret's smile was cruel. Oh, darling. It's not just that you're not good enough. It's that you're not even in the same league. You're playing at being a Callahan, but you're just a cheap imitation. I stumbled back, feeling as if I'd been slapped. The room was spinning, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Does Tom know you feel this way? I asked, my voice barely audible. Margaret's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained cold. Tom loves you, in his way. But he's a Callahan, through and through. He understands the importance of family, of tradition. Deep down, he knows you're not really one of us. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. No, you're wrong. Tom and I love each other. We're building a life together. A family. Margaret's laugh was like ice water down my spine. A family? Oh, Sarah. Do you really think we'd let you carry on the Callahan name? No, dear. If there are to be any children, we'll make sure they're raised properly. As true Callahans. The implication of her words hit me like a freight train. I felt my knees go weak, and I had to sit down again. You can't do that. You can't take my children away from me. Can't I? Margaret said, her voice soft but filled with menace. You'd be surprised what this family is capable of, Sarah. We protect our own. And you, my dear, are not. Our own. I sat there, stunned into silence. The ticking of the clock seemed to grow louder, marking each second of this nightmare. The smell of the baking pie, once so comforting, now made me feel nauseous. Why? I finally managed to choke out. Why tell me all this now? Why not just keep pretending? Margaret sighed, as if explaining something to a child. Because, Sarah, it's time you understood your place. You're here on borrowed time, living a life that isn't really yours. And the sooner you accept that, the easier it will be for everyone. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. No, I won't accept that. I love Tom, and he loves me. We're married. We're family. Margaret's smile was cold and patronizing. Oh, sweetie, marriage is just a piece of paper. It doesn't change who you are. And who you are, Sarah, is an outsider. A pretender. And it's time you faced that truth. I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and shock were still there, but now they were joined by a burning anger. You're wrong, I said, my voice low and intense. You're wrong about me, and you're wrong about what family means. Margaret raised an eyebrow, looking almost amused. Am I? We'll see about that, won't we? I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my head held high despite the tears threatening to spill over. As I reached the front door, I heard Margaret call out. Remember, Sarah, you'll never be a real Callahan. You're just playing house in a world you don't belong in. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet street. As I walked away from the brownstone, my mind was reeling. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my place in the world, had been shattered in the space of a single conversation. But beneath the pain and confusion, I felt a spark of something else. Determination. Defiance. I might not be a Callahan by blood, but I was Sarah Thompson Callahan. And I wasn't going to let Margaret or anyone else tell me where I belonged. As I walked home through the autumn streets of Boston, leaves crunching under my feet, I made a silent vow. I would prove Margaret wrong. I would show her, and the entire Callahan family, that love and loyalty meant more than blood or social status. The confrontation in that kitchen had changed everything. But as I felt the cool wind on my face and saw the golden afternoon light painting the city in warm hues, I realized it had also awakened something in me, a strength I didn't know I possessed, a determination to fight for my place, my love, my family. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that. But as I walked home, my head held high despite the tears on my cheeks, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Margaret's words had hurt me deeply, but they had also ignited a fire within me. A fire that would not be easily extinguished. The days following my confrontation with Margaret blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled mornings. I found myself wandering the streets of Boston, seeking solace in the familiar sights and sounds of the city I'd grown to love. The public garden, once a sanctuary of peace, now felt like a stage where I was constantly on display, imagining judgmental eyes following my every move. One particularly restless evening, I found myself sitting on a bench by the swan boats, watching as families and couples strolled by, their laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. A group of college students walked past, their carefree attitudes reminding me of my own days at UMass Boston. How simple life had seemed then, before I'd met Tom, before I'd become entangled in the complex web of the Callahan family. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I couldn't help but replay Margaret's words in my mind. "You're not really one of us. You never have been, and you never will be." The phrase echoed in my thoughts, a constant, painful refrain. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Tom's number. I wanted desperately to call him, to hear his voice and be reassured that everything would be okay. But doubt gnawed at me. What if Margaret was right? What if, deep down, Tom saw me the same way she did? Instead, I found myself dialing a different number. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. "Sarah? Is everything okay?" My best friend, Lily, sounded concerned. It was then that I realized I was crying. "Lil, I don't know what to do," I choked out, the words catching in my throat. "Where are you?" Lily's voice was firm, grounding. "I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, Lily's beat-up Subaru pulled up beside the park. She took one look at my tear-stained face and wordlessly pulled me into a hug. We drove in silence to her small apartment in Somerville, the city lights blurring past us like fireflies. Once inside, Lily made us both strong cups of tea and sat me down on her worn but comfortable couch. "Okay, spill," she said, her green eyes filled with concern. "What happened?" The whole story came pouring out of me, the confrontation with Margaret, the cruel words, the doubts about my place in the Callahan family. Lily listened intently, her expression shifting from shock to anger to sympathy. That which she muttered when I finished. "Sarah, you can't let her get to you like this. You're worth 10 of her." I shook my head, feeling the weight of Margaret's words pressing down on me. But what if she's right, Lil? What if I don't belong in their world? Maybe I've just been fooling myself all this time. Lily set down her mug with a firm thud. "Now you listen to me, Sarah Thompson Callahan. You are smart, kind, and hardworking. You graduated top of our class, you've built a successful career, and you've done it all on your own merit. If anyone doesn't belong, it's those stuck-up Callahans who can't see past their own silver spoons." Her words warmed me, but the doubt still lingered. But Tom, what if he feels the same way? What if he's just been humoring me all this time? Lily's expression softened. "Sarah, I've seen the way Tom looks at you. That man adores you. Have you talked to him about what happened?" I shook my head, shame coloring my cheeks. I've been avoiding him. I'm scared of what he might say." "You need to talk to him," Lily said firmly. "You can't let this fester. Tom deserves a chance to stand up for you, to prove Margaret wrong." Deep down, I knew she was right. But the fear of rejection, of having my worst fears confirmed, kept me rooted in place. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Lil. What if I lose everything?" Lily took my hands in hers, her grip warm and reassuring. "Then you'll still have me. You'll still have your family back in Worcester. You'll still be Sarah Thompson, the girl who tutored half our dorm through statistics and who makes a mean apple pie. The Callahans don't define you, Sarah. You define yourself." As I left Lily's apartment that night, her words echoed in my mind, battling against Margaret's cruel statements. I walked the familiar streets back to the brownstone Tom and I shared in Back Bay, each step feeling like a decision. When I reached our front door, I paused, my key hovering over the lock. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of the lamp in our living room. Tom was home. Taking a deep breath, I turned the key and stepped inside. Tom was sitting on the couch, a book open in his lap, but his eyes were unfocused, staring into the middle distance. When he heard me come in, he looked up, relief washing over his face. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." I stood there, frozen, taking in the sight of him. His dark hair was mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His blue eyes, usually so clear and confident, were clouded with concern. I needed some time to think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom took a step towards me, then hesitated, sensing my unease. "Sarah, what's going on? You've been distant for days. Did something happen?" I felt the tears welling up again, and I fought to keep them at bay. "Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He nodded, his expression serious. "Of course. You can ask me anything." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Do you think I belong in your family? Am I really a Callahan?" Tom's brow furrowed in confusion. "What?" "Sarah, of course you're a Callahan. You're my wife. What's brought this on?" The dam broke and the words came flooding out. I told him everything, the confrontation with Margaret, her cruel words, my doubts and fears. As I spoke, I watched Tom's expression change from confusion to shock to anger. When I finished, Tom was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but a bitter, disbelieving one. "I can't believe her," he said, shaking his head. "I knew Mom could be difficult, but this is beyond the pale." He crossed the room to me in 2 long strides, taking my face in his hands. "Sarah, listen to me. You are my wife. You're a Callahan. And more importantly, you're the woman I love. Nothing my mother or anyone else says can change that." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt still lingered. "But Tom, what about all the things she said? About class, about legacy, about children?" Tom's jaw clenched, a flash of anger in his eyes. "My mother doesn't speak for me, or for our family. Yes, the Callahans have money and a certain social standing. But that's not what makes us family. Love does that. Loyalty does that. And you, Sarah, have shown more love and loyalty than anyone I've ever known." He pulled me close, and I felt the tension in my body begin to melt away. "As for children," he continued, his voice soft, "if and when we have them, they'll be ours. Callahans, yes, but also Thompsons. They'll have your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. And I can't imagine anything better than that." I buried my face in his chest, letting his words wash over me. For the first time in days, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. But there was still one thing nagging at me. "What are we going to do about your mother?" I asked, my voice muffled against his shirt. Tom pulled back slightly, looking me in the eye. "We're going to stand up to her. Together. I won't let her treat you this way, Sarah. You're my family now, and I choose you. Always." As we stood there in our living room, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt a shift inside me. The hurt and doubt were still there, but they were being over as weeks passed, and life settled into an uneasy routine. Tom and I avoided family gatherings, making excuses about work commitments and travel. I threw myself into my job at the nonprofit, working long hours on fundraising campaigns and community outreach programs. It was easier to focus on helping others than to dwell on my own troubles. One crisp October morning, I was buried in paperwork at my desk when my phone buzzed. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I debated whether to answer. After a moment's hesitation, I picked up. "Hello, Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sarah, dear," she replied, her tone sickeningly sweet. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I glanced at the stack of grant proposals on my desk. "What can I do for you?" There was a pause, and when Margaret spoke again, her voice had lost its syrupy edge. "I find myself in a bit of a situation. I was hoping you might be able to assist. I leaned back in my chair, curiosity piqued despite myself. What kind of situation? Margaret sighed dramatically. It's rather embarrassing, really. I seem to have overextended myself financially this month. There's a charity auction coming up, and I've promised to make a significant donation. But with the recent market fluctuations, I felt a surge of disbelief. Was Margaret Callahan, the queen of Boston's social scene, asking me for money? How much are we talking about? I asked, keeping my tone carefully neutral. Oh, nothing too extravagant, Margaret said airily. Just $10,000 or so. I'd pay you back, of course. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. The amount made my head spin. $10,000 was more than I made in 2 months at the nonprofit. It was a sum that would make a real difference to the families we helped every day. I see, I said slowly. And you're coming to me for this? Margaret's laugh was brittle. Well, you're family, aren't you? And family helps each other out in times of need. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. I thought back to that day in her kitchen, to the cruel things she'd said about me not being a real Callahan. And now, here she was, appealing to family ties when it suited her. I'll have to think about it, I said, my mind racing. Can I get back to you? Of course, dear, Margaret replied, her voice tight. But do try to be quick about it. The auction is next week, and I need to make arrangements. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring out the window at the Boston skyline. The perfect fall day suddenly felt charged with possibility. This was an opportunity, but for what, exactly? I picked up my phone again and dialed Tom's number. Hey, love, he answered on the second ring. Everything okay? I filled him in on Margaret's request, my words tumbling out in a rush. When I finished, Tom was silent for a long moment. Well, he said finally, a hint of amusement in his voice. Isn't that interesting? What should we do? I asked, twirling a pen between my fingers nervously. Tom's voice softened. What do you want to do, Sarah? This is your call. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I closed my eyes, thinking hard. Part of me wanted to help, to be the bigger person and prove to Margaret that I was worthy of the Callahan name. But another part, a part that had been growing stronger since that confrontation in the kitchen, wanted to seize this moment. I think, I said slowly, I need to talk to her face to face. Tom's approval was evident in his voice. I think that's a great idea. Do you want me there with you? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, I need to do this on my own. But thank you. All right, Tom said. Just remember, you're stronger than you know, Sarah. And you have nothing to prove to her or anyone else. After hanging up, I took a deep breath and dialed Margaret's number. She answered on the first ring. Sarah, dear, have you made a decision? I have, I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. But I'd like to discuss this in person. Can we meet? There was a pause, then Margaret said, of course. Why don't you come over for tea this afternoon? Around 4? I agreed, then spent the rest of the day in a haze of anticipation and nerves. At 3:45, I found myself standing once again on the steps of the Callahan family home, my heart pounding in my chest. Margaret opened the door herself, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Sarah, do come in. I've just put the kettle on. I followed her into the familiar kitchen, the scene of our last confrontation. Everything looked the same. The gleaming countertops, the expensive appliances, the view of the carefully manicured garden through the window. But this time, I felt different. Stronger. More sure of myself. Margaret busied herself with the tea things, her movements precise and elegant as always. I must say, I was surprised to hear from you so quickly. I hope this means you've come to a favorable decision. I accepted the delicate china cup she offered me, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. Before we discuss that, Margaret, I'd like to talk about something else. She raised an eyebrow, settling into the chair across from me. Oh, and what might that be? I met her gaze steadily. I want to talk about what you said to me the last time we were in this kitchen. About me not being a real Callahan. Margaret's smile faltered for a moment, then returned, brittle and forced. Oh, Sarah, surely we don't need to rehash old conversations. Water under the bridge, isn't it? No, I said firmly. It's not. Because those words hurt me deeply, Margaret. They made me question my place in this family, my relationship with Tom, even my own worth. Margaret's expression hardened. Well, sometimes the truth is painful, dear. I was simply being honest about the realities of our world. I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. But that's just it, Margaret. It wasn't the truth. It was your opinion, colored by prejudice and a narrow view of what family means. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, surprising myself with my boldness. Please, let me finish. I've thought a lot about what you said, about belonging and legacy and what it means to be a Callahan. And I've realized something important. Margaret's lips were pressed into a thin line, but she remained silent, watching me with wary eyes. Being a Callahan isn't about blood or money or social status, I continued. It's about love, loyalty, and shared values. Tom chose me to be his wife, to be part of this family. And every day, I choose to be a Callahan, to uphold the best parts of what that name means. I took a sip of my tea, gathering strength for what I was about to say next. Which brings me to your request. You asked me for help, appealing to family ties. But Margaret, you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me I'm not family one day and then expect me to act like family the next when it's convenient for you. Margaret's face had gone pale, her knuckles white where she gripped her teacup. I see, she said, her voice icy. So you've come here to refuse my request and throw my words back in my face. How very common of you. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. No, Margaret. I've come here to give you a choice. Her eyebrows shot up. A choice? Yes, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. You can have the money you need. I'll write you a check right now if that's what you want. But in exchange, I want a public apology. At the next family gathering, you'll stand up and acknowledge that you were wrong about me, that I am a true Callahan in every way that matters. Margaret's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, I replied. Or, there's another option. We can forget about the money. Instead, you and I can start fresh. We can try to build a real relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. It won't be easy, and it will take time, but I'm willing to try if you are. The kitchen was silent save for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Margaret stared at me, her expression unreadable. I waited, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Finally, Margaret spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. And if I choose neither option? I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. Then nothing changes. You'll find another way to get the money you need, and we'll continue as we have been. But you'll have missed an opportunity, Margaret. An opportunity to grow, to heal, to be part of something genuine. I picked up my purse, ready to leave. The choice is yours. I'll be at the family dinner next Sunday. You can let me know your decision then. As I walked to the door, I heard Margaret's voice behind me. Sarah. I turned, my hand on the doorknob. Margaret was standing in the kitchen doorway, looking suddenly older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. I'll think about what you've said, she managed, her voice strained. I nodded, offering her a small smile. That's all I ask. As I walked down the steps of the Callahan home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since that fateful confrontation, I felt truly free. Whatever Margaret decided, I knew I had stood up for myself, for my place in the family. I pulled out my phone and dialed Tom's number. When he answered, I could hear the smile in his voice. How did it go? I looked back at the house, a soft autumn breeze ruffling my hair. It went exactly as it needed to. I'll tell you all about it over dinner. As I walked home through the leaf-strewn streets of Boston, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it as Sarah Thompson Callahan on my own terms. The week leading up to the family dinner crawled by at an agonizing pace. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and bringing projects home. Tom, bless him, gave me space, but made sure I knew he was there if I needed him. His quiet support was a balm to my frayed nerves. Sunday arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. As Tom and I drove to his parents' house in Beacon Hill, the trees lining the streets were a blaze of red and gold. I fiddled with the collar of my dress, a simple but elegant navy blue number that I'd chosen carefully for the occasion. "You look beautiful," Tom said, taking his eyes off the road for a moment to smile at me. "And more importantly, you look strong." I managed a small smile in return. "I feel like I'm going into battle." Tom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Remember, whatever happens in there, we're a team. You and me against the world if necessary." We pulled up to the imposing brownstone that had always intimidated me in the past. Today, though, I felt different. Not fearless, exactly, but resolute. Whatever Margaret had decided, I was ready to face it. Tom's father, Richard, answered the door. His weathered face broke into a genuine smile when he saw us. "Tom, Sarah, come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room." As we entered, I could hear the murmur of conversation and the clink of glasses. The Callahan clan was out in full force, Tom's siblings with their spouses, a few cousins, and of course, Margaret, holding court from her favorite armchair. She looked up as we entered, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before flicking away. I couldn't read her expression, but there was something different about her demeanor. She seemed less certain somehow. The next hour was a blur of small talk and forced smiles. I chatted with Tom's sister Emily about her new job, cooed over pictures of his cousin's new baby, and managed to avoid any one-on-one interactions with Margaret. But I could feel her eyes on me throughout, watching, assessing. Finally, Richard called everyone to the dining room. The long table was set with the family's best china, gleaming under the light of the crystal chandelier. I took my seat next to Tom, directly across from Margaret. As the first course was served, a tension settled over the table. Family dinners were usually lively affairs, full of debate and laughter. Today, though, there was an undercurrent of unease. I wondered if others had picked up on the strain between Margaret and me. Midway through the main course, Margaret cleared her throat. The table fell silent, all eyes turning to her. This was it, I realized. The moment of truth. "I have something I'd like to say," Margaret began, her voice steady, but lacking its usual commanding tone. She paused, her eyes sweeping the table before landing on me. "It concerns Sarah." I felt Tom's hand find mine under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I met Margaret's gaze, my chin lifted slightly, ready for whatever was coming. "As some of you may know," Margaret continued, "Sarah and I have had our differences in the past. I've said things, done things, that I'm not proud of." A ripple of surprise went through the room. Margaret Callahan admitting to being wrong? It was unprecedented. "I've always prided myself on being a guardian of this family's legacy," she went on. "I thought I knew what that meant, preserving our social standing, our traditions, our exclusivity." She took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. "But I've come to realize that I was wrong. Sarah has shown me what it truly means to be a Callahan." I felt a lump forming in my throat. Was this really happening? In the face of my less than welcoming behavior, Sarah has demonstrated grace, strength, and an unwavering commitment to this family. She has embodied the values that we Callahans have always claimed to hold dear: loyalty, perseverance, and most importantly, love. Margaret's eyes met mine again, and I was shocked to see them glistening with unshed tears. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. A public one. I was wrong to question your place in this family. You are a Callahan in every way that matters, and we're fortunate to have you." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye in the room on me, waiting for my response. My mind was reeling. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, this complete capitulation hadn't been one of them. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "Thank you, Margaret," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Your words mean a great deal to me. I've always wanted to be a part of this family, to contribute to its legacy in my own way. All I've ever asked for is the chance to do that." Margaret nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "And you've more than earned that chance. I hope we can start anew, Sarah. Build the relationship we should have had from the beginning." I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying lift from my shoulders. "I'd like that very much," I said softly. The tension in the room broke like a dam. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once. Tom's sister Emily was wiping away tears. His brother Jack was proposing a toast to family, old and new, and even Richard looked misty-eyed. As the commotion settled, I felt Tom's lips brush my ear. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "You did it. You stood your ground and won her over." I turned to him, a wide smile breaking across my face. "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done this without you." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of good food, flowing wine, and genuinely warm conversation. For the first time, I felt truly accepted, not just tolerated. Margaret even asked me about my work at the nonprofit, showing a genuine interest I'd never seen from her before. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone with Margaret in the kitchen, helping her load the dishwasher, a task she usually relegated to the housekeeper. "You know," she said, handing me a crystal wine glass to place in the rack. I meant what I said out there. "You've taught me a valuable lesson, Sarah." I paused, looking at her curiously. "What's that?" Margaret sighed, leaning against the counter. "That family isn't about blood or background. It's about choice. Every day, we choose who we want to be, who we want to surround ourselves with. You chose us, despite everything. And in doing so, you've made us better." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know." She reached out, patting my hand awkwardly but sincerely. "I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope you'll give me the chance." I nodded, smiling through my tears. "Of course. We're family, after all." As Tom and I drove home that night, the city lights blurring past us, I felt a sense of peace I'd never experienced before. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Years of hurt and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single night. But for the first time, I felt like I was truly on the path to belonging. "So," Tom said, glancing at me with a grin, "how does it feel to have officially conquered the formidable Margaret Callahan?" I laughed, the sound free and unburdened. "Honestly, it feels like a new beginning. For all of us." As we pulled up to our brownstone, I took a moment to look up at the star-studded sky. The autumn air was crisp and full of possibility. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain, the doubt, the struggle, but also the love, the growth, and now the acceptance. I was Sarah Thompson Callahan. I had fought for my place in this family, and I had won. Not through ultimatums or threats, but through staying true to myself and my values. It was a victory that tasted sweeter than any I'd ever known. As we walked hand in hand to our front door, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. I had found my strength, my voice, and my place in the world. And nothing, not societal expectations, not family drama, not even my own self-doubt, could take that away from me. The future stretched out before us, bright with promise. And I couldn't wait to see what it held. The weeks following the family dinner were a whirlwind of change. The dynamics within the Callahan family shifted noticeably, with Margaret's public apology serving as a catalyst for more open and honest communication among all of us. One crisp Saturday morning, I found myself walking along the Charles River, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet. The events of the past few months played through my mind like a movie reel, each scene tinged with a new perspective. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Margaret. "Brunch tomorrow? Just the two of us." I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. Despite the progress we'd made, the idea of one-on-one time with Margaret still made me nervous. But I knew that building a real relationship would take effort from both sides. I typed back a quick, "Sounds great." The Paramount at 11? As I continued my walk, I reflected on how much had changed. At work, I found myself speaking up more in meetings, confident in my ideas and my ability to express them. The lingering doubt that had always whispered, "You don't belong here," was fading, replaced by a steady assurance in my capabilities. Tom had noticed the change too. "You're glowing," he'd said the other night, looking at me with a mixture of pride and love that made my heart swell. "It's like you finally let yourself shine." The next morning, I arrived at the Paramount a few minutes early. The cozy Beacon Hill restaurant was bustling with its usual Sunday crowd. I spotted Margaret at a corner table, looking uncharacteristically casual in a soft gray sweater. "Sarah," she greeted me with a warm smile, standing to give me a brief hug. "Thank you for meeting me." As we settled in and ordered our food, an awkward silence fell between us. We'd never done this before, just the two of us, without the buffer of family or social events. Margaret cleared her throat. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she began, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. "It's about the charity auction." I tensed slightly, remembering the catalyst for our confrontation. "Oh!" She met my eyes, her expression earnest. "I wanted you to know that I didn't go through with it. The donation, I mean." I blinked in surprise. But I thought, wasn't it important for your standing in the community? Margaret's laugh was soft and self-deprecating. That's what I've always told myself. But after our conversation, I did some real soul-searching. I realized I was caught up in a game of appearances, always trying to outdo everyone else. It wasn't about charity at all. Our food arrived, and we fell silent for a moment as the waitress set down our plates. I took a bite of my Eggs Benedict, mulling over Margaret's words. "So what did you do instead?" I asked finally. A small smile played at the corners of Margaret's mouth. "I made a donation to your nonprofit instead. Anonymously." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What?" "Margaret, wow. Thank you." She waved her hand dismissively, but I could see the pleased flush on her cheeks. "It's not just about the money, Sarah. I want to understand the work you do. Maybe even help out sometime if you'd be open to it." The idea of Margaret Callahan, queen of Boston high society, volunteering at our small community center was almost comical. But the sincerity in her eyes touched me deeply. "I'd like that," I said softly. "We could always use more hands." As we continued our meal, the conversation flowed more easily. Margaret told me about her own early days in Boston, fresh out of college and determined to make a name for herself. I shared stories from my childhood in Worcester, the daughter of a teacher and a nurse who had always taught me the value of hard work and kindness. "You know," Margaret said as we were finishing up, "I've always envied that about you." I looked at her, puzzled. "Envied what?" She gestured vaguely. "Your groundedness. Your sense of purpose." I spent so many years chasing status and approval, I think I lost sight of what really matters. I felt a surge of empathy for the woman sitting across from me. For the first time, I saw beyond the polished exterior to the vulnerable human beneath. "It's never too late to change course," I said gently. "Look at us. Who would have thought we'd be sitting here like this a few months ago?" Margaret's laugh was genuine and warm. "Indeed. You've taught me a valuable lesson, Sarah. And I'm grateful for it." As we left the restaurant, Margaret surprised me with another hug, this one longer and more heartfelt than the first. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." I walked home with a lightness in my step, feeling as though another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. The road ahead was still long. But for the first time, I felt truly optimistic about my place in the Callahan family. Over the next few months, the changes in our family dynamic continued to unfold. Family dinners became lively affairs filled with genuine conversation and laughter. Margaret, true to her word, began volunteering at my nonprofit, bringing her formidable organizational skills to bear on our fundraising efforts. Tom and I grew closer than ever, our bond strengthened by the trials we'd faced together. One night, as we cuddled on the couch watching the snow fall outside our window, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Sarah," he said, taking my hand in his, "I've been thinking. What would you say to starting a family of our own?" My heart skipped a beat. We'd talked about children in abstract terms before, but this felt different. More real. "Are you sure?" I asked, searching his face. "With everything that's happened." Tom's smile was tender. "I've never been more sure of anything. You've shown me what true strength and love look like. I want to build a family with you, to raise children who will embody the best of both of us." Tears pricked at my eyes as I leaned in to kiss him. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. "Let's do it." The next family dinner, we shared our news. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. But it was Margaret's reaction that touched me the most. She came to me with tears in her eyes, enveloping me in a warm embrace. "Oh, my dear," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for you both. This child will be so loved." As I looked around the room at the faces of my family, not by blood, but by choice and love, I felt a profound sense of belonging. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain and doubt, but it had led me here, to this moment of pure joy and acceptance. Later that night, as Tom and I lay in bed discussing baby names and nursery colors, I found myself reflecting on the transformation I'd undergone. I was no longer the insecure woman desperately seeking approval. I had found my voice, my strength, and my place in the world. I placed a hand on my still flat stomach, imagining the life growing within. This child would be born into a family that had learned the true meaning of love and acceptance. They would know their worth not because of their name or their background, but because of the content of their character. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of peace. The future was bright with possibility, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them, not just as Sarah Thompson or Sarah Callahan, but as Sarah Thompson Callahan, a woman who had fought for her place and emerged stronger for it. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now, surrounded by love and secure in my own worth, I was ready for whatever life had in store. As the seasons changed and winter gave way to spring, my body began to change too. The small bump that had started to show became impossible to hide, and with it came a new set of challenges and joys. One sunny Saturday morning, as I stood in front of the mirror examining my growing belly, I felt a flutter of movement. My hand flew to my stomach, a smile spreading across my face. "Tom," I called out, my voice filled with excitement. "Come quick." Tom rushed into the room, concern etched on his face. "What is it? Are you okay?" I grabbed his hand and placed it on my belly. "Wait for it," I whispered. A moment later, we felt it together, a tiny kick, like a butterfly's wing against my skin. Tom's eyes widened in wonder. "Is that?" I nodded, happy tears spilling down my cheeks. "That's our baby." As we stood there, marveling at the life we'd created, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. This child, half Thompson and half Callahan, would be a bridge between two worlds. They would inherit the best of both families, the warmth and groundedness of my upbringing, and the ambition and drive of Tom's. The news of my pregnancy had sparked a transformation in Margaret. Gone was the cold, judgmental woman who had once made me feel so small. In her place was a doting grandmother-to-be, eager to be involved in every aspect of the pregnancy. One afternoon, as we sat in her sun-drenched conservatory sipping herbal tea, Margaret surprised me with a question. "Sarah, dear, I was wondering, would you allow me to host your baby shower?" I blinked in surprise. "You want to host my baby shower?" Margaret nodded, a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "I know I have a lot to make up for. I thought this might be a good way to show you, and everyone else, that things have changed. That I've changed." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Margaret, I'd be honored." The weeks leading up to the baby shower were a flurry of activity. Margaret threw herself into the planning with gusto, consulting me on every detail from the guest list to the menu. It was during one of these planning sessions that she broached another subject that had been weighing on my mind. "Sarah," she said, setting down her notepad, "I've been thinking about names." I tensed slightly. In the Callahan family, names carried weight. Children were often named after ancestors or influential family members. It was a tradition I'd been dreading. Margaret must have sensed my unease because she quickly added, "I want you to know that whatever you and Tom choose, I'll support it fully. This is your child and your decision." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you, Margaret. That means a lot." She reached out and patted my hand. "I've learned my lesson about trying to control everything. This baby is a new beginning for all of us. A chance to do things differently." The day of the baby shower arrived, and I was amazed at the transformation Margaret had wrought in the Callahan family home. The usually formal living room had been turned into a pastel wonderland, with soft blues and greens dominating the color scheme. We had decided to keep the baby's gender a surprise. As guests began to arrive, a mix of Callahan family members, my own family from Worcester, and friends from both sides, I felt a sense of unity that I'd never experienced before. Here, in this room, were people from all walks of life, all gathered to celebrate the new life Tom and I had created. My mother, Ellen, pulled me aside at one point, her eyes misty. "Oh, Sarah," she said, cupping my face in her hands. "I'm so proud of you. Look at all you've accomplished." I felt my own eyes well up. "I couldn't have done it without you and Dad. Everything you taught me, it's what got me through the tough times." She pulled me into a tight hug. "You're going to be an amazing mother, sweetheart. This baby is so lucky to have you." As the party progressed, I found myself in a quiet corner with Tom's sister, Emily. She'd always been kind to me, but there had been a distance between us that I'd never quite managed to bridge. "You know," Emily said, sipping her punch, "I owe you an apology." I looked at her, surprised. "What for?" She sighed, setting down her glass. "For not standing up for you more. When Mom was, well, when she was being Mom." I should have said something. I shook my head. "Emily, you don't have to dash." "No, I do," she interrupted. I was so used to just going along with whatever Mom said, I didn't stop to think about how it was affecting you. But watching you stand your ground, seeing how you've changed this family for the better, it's inspired me to find my own voice too. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you, Emily. That means more than you know." As the shower wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. The pile of gifts, the leftover cake, the balloons bobbing gently in the corner, it all represented so much more than just a celebration of a coming baby. It was a testament to how far we'd all come. Margaret approached me as I was saying goodbye to the last of the guests. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft, "I have one more gift for you. It's not much, but, well, here." She handed me a small, beautifully wrapped package. Inside was a delicate silver picture frame. Engraved along the bottom were the words, "Thompson Callahan, a new legacy." Tears sprang to my eyes as I traced the engraving with my finger. "Margaret, it's beautiful." She smiled, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I want you to know that I meant what I said before. Whatever name you choose for this baby, whatever traditions you want to follow or not follow, it's your choice. You and Tom are starting something new here, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it." As I hugged her, I felt the baby kick again, as if in agreement. This child would be born into a family that had learned the hard way about acceptance, love, and the true meaning of legacy. That night, as Tom and I lay in bed, surrounded by the gifts from the shower, we finally broached the subject of names. "You know," Tom said, his hand resting on my belly, "I've been thinking, what if we named the baby after your dad?" I propped myself up on my elbow, looking at him in surprise. "Really? You'd want to do that?" Tom nodded, a soft smile on his face. "Your dad is one of the best men I know. Hardworking, kind, always putting family first. Those are the values I want our child to have." I felt a rush of love for this man who continually surprised me with his thoughtfulness. "Thomas Robert Thompson Callahan," I said, testing the name out. "I like it. And if it's a girl?" Tom asked. I thought for a moment. "How about Ellen Margaret? After my mom and yours?" Tom's smile widened. "It's perfect. A bridge between our families, just like this little one." As we drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey to this point had been long and often painful, but every step had led us here, to this moment of perfect contentment, on the cusp of a new adventure. The coming months brought more changes. Tom and I decided to move to a larger home in Jamaica Plain, a diverse neighborhood that felt like the perfect place to raise our child. The process of house hunting and moving while heavily pregnant was challenging, but it also gave us the opportunity to create a space that was truly ours, a blend of my practical, cozy style and Tom's more modern aesthetic. As my due date approached, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me here. The scared, insecure woman who had once stood in Margaret's kitchen, feeling small and out of place, seemed like a distant memory. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to stand up for it. The day our daughter was born, Ellen Margaret Thompson Callahan, all 7 pounds and 6 ounces of her, was the day I truly understood what it meant to create a legacy. As I held her in my arms, Tom beaming beside me and both sets of grandparents cooing over her, I knew that this was what family was all about. Not blood, not name, not social status, but love, pure, unconditional love. In the years that followed, as Ellen grew from a babbling baby to a curious toddler to a bright, compassionate child, I watched our families grow closer. The lines that had once seemed so rigid, between Thompson and Callahan, between old money and new, between tradition and progress, blurred and faded. Margaret became a doting grandmother, always ready with a story or a cookie. My parents brought their warmth and groundedness into the Callahan family gatherings, changing the dynamics in subtle but profound ways. And Tom and I? We navigated parenthood as we had everything else, as a team, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and the joyful milestones alike. As I sit here now, watching Ellen play in the backyard of our Jamaica Plain home, I can't help but marvel at how far we've all come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were times when I thought I might break under the pressure. But each challenge made me stronger, each victory more sweet. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or name, but by love and choice. That tradition can be honored while still making room for change. That standing up for yourself doesn't mean pushing others down. And most importantly, that the most beautiful legacies are the ones we create ourselves, day by day, choice by choice. As Ellen runs up to me, her dark curls bouncing and her eyes, so like Tom's, sparkling with excitement, I scoop her up in my arms. "What is it, sweetheart?" I ask. She grins, revealing the gap where her front tooth used to be. "Can we go visit Grandma Margaret today? She promised to teach me how to make her famous apple pie." I smile, thinking of how far Margaret and I have come. "Of course we can, honey. Let's go make some memories." And as we head inside to get ready, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. For the family I was born into, for the family I married into, and for the family we've all created together. It's not perfect, no family is, but it's ours. And that makes it the most precious thing in the world.